It's hot here, y'all. It's like 90 degrees already.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, tomorrow is May.
Yeah.
Josh, I need to get your shirt size because Robert and I looked at golf shirts this
Okay.
weekend.
Oh yeah, when is that?
It's the end of this month. It's on
I'll do
they're
my
not the end of
meeting
this
upside
month
down
and the end of oh my God.
like a bat.
It's May 31st.
Probably an extra large.
Okay.
What is this for?
It's for a golf tournament we're gonna go be in Santa Fe. Do you want to
That'll
come
be
for
so
it?
fun. Yeah. I
You
don't know anything about it.
should.
I play putt-putt. I kick my kids' butts in putt-putt all the time.
I know Josh is like, I don't play golf, but I can. I
Yeah,
had a
just say
meeting with
Rusty.
this lady this past last week. I had a meeting with her. She's an HR person through like Robert Half, and she places like accountants and stuff like that. And we were talking about golf, and she said she calls it adult golf when you actually go to the golf course and you play golf. And I'm like, so what is the other? And she's like, I don't know. I just think of adult golf when you go to the golf course, and like when you go to
Yeah.
like Top Golf or you go to
Yeah.
Putt Putt, that's you know,
That's not real golf.
that's not adult golf.
Yeah.
She's like grown up golf.
I don't know. I think probably a lot of the men on the golf course aren't really playing adult golf. They're playing adult golf.
Welcome back to Getting Down to Business, the show that's all about helping your dental practice succeed every step of the way. Whether you're looking to buy or sell a practice, the Hindley Burgmaier Group is here to help guide you along the path, whether you're entering or exiting your dental career. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and grab a copy of Getting Down to Business, available on Amazon. Now, let's pick up where we left off last week after interviewing Laura Snyder, DDS, and see what dentists need most in order to master the purchase process of buying a dental practice. Okay, let's get down to business.
Okay, so for this episode, all right. So on this episode of Getting Down to Business, I wanted to just kind of go over some of the things that we learned from last week's episode with me. When we interviewed Dr. Snyder, she talked a lot about how much she wished she had prepared beforehand.
Because as
And
I said, if I could have done it over, I would have started on transitioning over accounts and learning the business side prior to patient care. Because it was very overwhelming and a lot at the beginning.
I think that first of all, I think all dentists who are working for someone right now that are not current business owners will experience feeling overwhelmed purchasing a business. And it's not just associated with dental practices, it's any type of business. When you go into owning something, your own business, it's going to feel overwhelming. There's so much that you need to know. It's not going to be something that is ever going to be easy, no matter how much you prepare. However, if you engage with industry experts, they can at least help you maneuver through before becoming the business owner, and also during the process of owning the business, and then afterwards. Your attorney, your due diligence specialist, your accountant, your consultant, because a lot of dentists, they hire consultants that help them. There's a lot of things that every person that's helping you is going to have things that you need to do in order to have a successful transition into practice ownership. And the first year is going to be bumpy.
Rough air ahead. Room for some chops.
The first year that you own the practice is going to be bumpy because your natural tendency is to want to just provide care for your patients.
And those are the same obstacles, I guess you could say, that you would experience whether you purchase your business from someone else or if you start it
Yeah,
from scratch.
I agree.
here we are again. I mean, the stuff that Norton Hindley says in his book, she was basically just saying that exact same thing, and basically saying like, hey, I didn't have the training, in dental school.
Because they teach you the dentistry in dental school. They don't teach you anything about business.
That's why obviously working with the Hindley Burgmaier group was so helpful for her, because she was able to have those experts in her corner, help her take each step along the way.
I think what Laura's comment was is that she would have rather been working with the seller on the business side of it, knowing like what bills to pay, what insurance is, how the technology works, how do you schedule. But all she was doing when she got in the practice is seeing patients,
Right.
trying to close on the deal. And then it was hard for her to take a step back and look at it from a business owner perspective. So I think that's why she said that.
Yeah, all those things that you talked about, those it seems like it would be a good idea to do in any business.
When a buyer presents a letter of intent to purchase a practice, it usually spells out a due diligence process and timeline for the due diligence. And in the due diligence, that's when they learn everything that they need to know. One other thing that dentists need to be clear about as well is that if you're buying a practice from a retired dentist or a retiring dentist, usually retiring dentists have, they are contracted with Delta Dental Premier, which is a special reimbursement rate that nobody else can get. So those are the kinds of things that you need to look at when you're doing your due diligence as well, is looking at, when I credential, will I be able to credential and get the same reimbursement rate? If not, how would that decrease my earnings, from the previous owner and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that people should be looking at. And it's hard to do that if you're working in the practice at the time that you're trying to take that time to do that. There are a lot of dentists that are working during that time that they're doing their due diligence, and they're meeting with the sellers at night. They're meeting with them on Fridays when they're off. They're meeting them on Saturdays and going over this stuff with the seller.
Being on the buyer side, which is kind of interesting because, we interviewed Dr. Snyder, who was a buyer. I'd really like to interview a seller at some point, just so we can get both sides of the experience. But anyways, the due diligence process, how critical is that in evaluating the viability of a dental practice acquisition?
It's extremely critical because you want to be confident in what you're purchasing. This is a major purchase. So our due diligence process is very similar to the regular traditional valuation of a seller. However, it's of the point of view of the buyer, and we are giving our opinion of the fair market value so that the buyer can compare that to the asking price. Now, we understand that an asking price and a fair market value are not the same thing. They can be significantly different. Asking price, includes the motivation of the buyer, or the motivation of the seller, whereas fair market value does not have any motivation. And that allows the buyer to decide, what is important to them, if they're willing to arguably overpay, in order to get the perfect practice. Maybe it's in the town that they want to move to. Maybe, there's lots of reasons why they may be motivated to buy, or that they can just feel confident going into negotiations. So it's really important. Even if you've been working in the practice that you want to buy, there's always going to be things that you don't know about, and the trust me method is not ideal. You don't want to do that. You don't want to have a bad relationship, so it's best to just go in and know as much as you possibly can. If you get a conventional loan or SBA loan, you can be paying between 10 and 25 years or something on your practice. So it's very important that you're happy with your purchase.
Right. And a lot of dentists have student loans that they have on top of that. it can get very overwhelming. Can you just kind of, in layman's terms, break down how you, conduct your in-depth due diligence to determine the fair market value of the properties for sale? For example, the one that we just talked to, was there anything that you did different?
Kelly, when we originally valued that practice, it was a fair market value for the seller. It was not due diligence, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the seller had already received, or that she received information that her practice was valued at X.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that's what she wanted, that's what she said it was determined, we decided that we needed to do our own valuation to make sure that we could defend that amount with a potential buyer.
Yeah. I would say that the valuation for that practice wasn't necessarily different than other valuations, other than, as Kelly mentioned, the seller had some medical issues. So there was a degree of motivation to sell. So in that instance, she really wasn't trying to get every single penny she could out of her practice. It was important to sell her practice as quickly as possible. But we always want to make sure that it's a good fit. Also, we're trying to um, we're trying to get the best fit for the buyer and or for the seller first, if that's who engaged us, but also for the buyer. We're not going to price a value. We call it price to perfection, meaning that we've priced, the buyer is going to take 100% of the profit to pay off the practice, and they only have like a dollar of leeway here or there. We don't want to do that. That's not a good idea or setting you up for success. We want to make sure that there's an adequate amount of free cash flow. So I wouldn't say it was significantly different, other than we did have that factor of motivation of the seller.
So kind of like, to simplify like the valuation process, if you want to simplify it, and if so, just get a generalization of how, that works. I think, Rachel, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong or whatever, but what we like to look at are a few things. We like to look at the financials. So we do a financial assessment. We look at their patient base. We look at where they're located. We look at all of their equipment and their assets they have in the practice, their reputation, and Rachel will do what, she'll look at market trends. She'll look at comparisons with other dental practices that we've done valuations for, to see, like, are they consistent with the trends that she's seeing? And that's just baseline. I mean, those are just basic things that we look at. And then in each category that I just outlined, there's a deep dive, and there's probably a lot of stuff that goes into each thing.
Yeah, and really the most important thing is in that financial analysis, we want to identify any discretionary income or expenses. We really want to represent the true profitability, normalized profitability of the practice that we're valuing. And then we'll look at multiple different approaches, income approach, asset approach, market approach, and then multiple valuation methods related to those. So that we're not looking at just one approach or one valuation method. We're looking at the value in many, from multiple different angles, so that we're really confident that we've narrowed down a really good range of value for the seller, or or for the buyer.
Can you just briefly talk about, like, when you say market trends, what do you mean by that?
We use a few different publications to give us information on for in this situation it's dental industry, but if I was valuing a different business in a different industry, then we would look at that industry specifically. But those publications give us information on sales of businesses in that industry across the country. And they tell us, year over year over year, what are different multiples that you can use, multiple of revenue, multiples of EBITDA, of seller's discretionary earnings, of gross profit, et cetera, et cetera. And we use those. Those would be our market guides, that tell us what is the market seeing in sales of businesses in the specific industry.
And it might vary based on like the type of dentist, right? If they're general, or if they're a specialist, or if they're
It varies on where you are in the country. It varies on the size business you are. Are you under $1 million? Are you 1 to 5? Or are you over $5 million? There's a lot of factors that affect it. Mhm.
wow, okay. What sort of strategies can, we offer our clients when it comes to, them wanting to buy a practice and us working with the seller to try to find that sweet spot of it's a win for them, it's a win for them. Are there any specific strategies that we could discuss that would help us, negotiate favorable terms with our sellers?
Go ahead.
Or is it just like, no, this is what I want. I want this much, so I'm not going to budge. Like, are
We've
there?
had several where we did due diligence for businesses where we disagree on, well, let me back up. We don't know what their opinion of their fair market value is. We know what their asking price is. And based on our calculation of fair market value, we believe that their asking price is highly motivated and or unreasonable. It's the buyer's decision to either go through or not go through with the purchase. The buyer may be just as highly motivated and say, I'm just dying to own this business, and they can, certainly do that. However, there have been situations where, our calculation of fair market value was significantly different than the asking price, and the seller was not willing to budge. They said, I want what I want. And, the interested party said, thanks, but no thanks. That
But
happens.
But it's not only about money either, Josh. There's some things that, you're asking price is your asking price, and then the dentist will come in with the same offer. Like, they'll offer the exact amount that the seller's asking for. But there are certain other things in the offer that maybe there's a struggle between the two doctors on, the negotiation process and how they're negotiating. The thing that I would advise a buyer when they're purchasing a dental practice, first and foremost, have the understanding, or really understand, that a lot of the times, more than not, the dental practice that you are wanting to purchase has an emotional tie to the seller. I want to say that that's most of the time, because the seller has spent their whole career building the practice, making it what it is, whether it's good or bad. They've put a lot of their time and effort into this. And so they have emotional ties to the practice, whereas the buyer doesn't have that emotional tie yet. And so that would be the first thing, is just understanding that there's emotions involved with selling a dental practice, whether the seller is wanting to leave because they're forced to do that, or if they want to do it. Even if they want to do it and they're not ready to retire, but they want to do it, there's still emotional ties to that practice. They've built relationships with their patients, they've built relationships with their staff. The second thing is that in the negotiations process, there always should be compromise. And I advise sellers on the doing that. compromising on the things that they want. And also the buyers compromising on some of the things that they want. I'm doing a dental acquisition right now where there were certain things that the buyer wanted, but the seller needed them in a certain way. The buyer did compromise. And so that is helping him with his goodwill with the seller as well, and helping that relationship build.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important part there about the emotional significance of the business from the seller side. And, that business is like their baby in a lot of ways. And the buyer, who is not emotionally attached yet, is not going to be able to perhaps see things quite through the same lens. So it's important to have that understanding going into the negotiations and things like that. Okay, so I kind of want to jump ahead a little bit to different financing options that we can explore that are available to prospective dental practice owners.
A lot of times, when dentists want to buy practices and real estate all at the same time, that's a pretty big purchase. And some sellers think that that's not possible because during the time that they were looking at buying their dental practice and real estate, it wasn't really that big of a thing where people were able to do that all at once. They would usually buy the practice, and then after a couple of years they would buy the real estate. But nowadays, you can do both pretty easily. Private equity firms are used a lot to help with that. And some private equity firms, what they do is they will put it out to bid, like who wants to take this loan, and banks will bid on it and come in and say, well, we will, and these are the terms, etc. And a lot of times, for what my experience has been, SBA will lend on real estate and the practice with no down payment. And so that is nice for dentists who want to buy both, that don't have 10% down for the real estate, but it's spread over 25 years. And so that's also something to consider, that, usually the SBA loan will be a longer term. You can go the conventional way, which is going to a bank and buying a dental practice. And right now, a lot of banks that specialize in lending for dental practices, there's no money down. Now the real estate's a little bit different. Like I said, a lot of banks will want 10% down for the real estate. You can also look at different banks and see what kind of interest rates they can give you, if they can beat each other as far as interest rates, and what the closing fees and how the process works, and the timeline of how fast they can close, etc. That's something that you should consider as well. There's also owner financing. So if you see yourself in a situation where we say maybe the value's at 500, the dentist is asking for 600,000, you really, really want that dental practice. The bank is only going to lend on 500,000 because they do their own valuation. They do their own calculation of what they will lend on the practice, and if their calculation usually is pretty close to what we come with, what the value is. And so if they say, okay, well, we will only lend 500,000, a lot of times the seller will be asked to carry a portion of the loan, and they can be just like the bank and have or issue an interest rate, and it should be comparable to what the interest rates are. It shouldn't be inflated or anything like that, but yeah, they can actually hold a portion of the loan and the buyer can pay over a period of time in contingency payments, and then have like a balloon payment where they refinance, and then they could pay the seller off at the end. It also helps too in those types of situations, the capital gains, which I won't get into because I do not know how capital gains works. That's more of an Eric question. And maybe one day he'll be on one of these, so he can answer.
We got to get him
but
on the Dr. Davis spot. Sorry, keep going. Let's wrap this
But-
thought up and move on to the next part.
yeah. But yeah, so so those are some creative ways and some different ways that you can finance a dental practice. Or you could do 100% owner financing.
I
Sometimes,
don't recommend it.
yeah, sometimes people do that. I wouldn't recommend that for a seller, especially.
Unless you want to, unless you're open to coming back in and running the practice again,
Right.
I would not
If
want to
a
be tied
default
to it
happens, yeah.
long term. Yeah, that's not the first option.
So out of the options that I suggested, Rachel, which one do you recommend?
I mean,
Would
a
you recommend?
normal conventional loan, if you can get it, for the dental industry, the interest rate is like really low because it's very low risk. So, being able to finance for only like 10 years is best case scenario, I think. I mean, if you have money to put down, even better, but in our opinion, a fair market value is based on terms of like a traditional conventional loan. When we're looking at free cash flow, we're looking at the free cash flow based on note payments on a 10-year period
10-year
with
period.
a regular interest rate. So we're not looking at, well, but if you finance it out for 25 years, the payments will be lower and blah, blah. No, no, no. We're basing our free cash flow and our ultimate reasonability of our asking for, or excuse me, of our fair market value. We're looking at how reasonable that is compared to like a traditional conventional 10-year loan.
When it comes to like the legal side of things and like what are the main legal considerations when purchasing a practice?
You have to have, you mean like a non-compete and
Sure, just anything.
things like that?
Based on your expertise, what have you guys seen working with the legal professionals when you guys facilitate these transitions?
That's more of a Kelly thing.
There's agreements that need to be made, and there's a few agreements that, just like we had talked about a couple episodes ago, that we have the letter of intent, which is non-binding, so it's not a legal document. It's just basically saying this is my intent to purchase your practice, and these are the things that it's contingent on. And then you list out your contingencies and specify those. You have to be licensed in New Mexico. You have to be a licensed dentist in New Mexico. You can't have any lapses or I mean, not to say that you can't have them, but you shouldn't have like a lapse in your license. You need to get it renewed so that it's active and current. You really shouldn't have any grievances against you. There is certain things sometimes that happens, right? Rachel, you had one that was, like that, but as a buyer, maybe you just don't want any liens against you on the practice that can't be resolved,
You want to be in good tax standing.
you want to be in
Yeah.
good tax standing. Because one of the things that was very interesting that I found out recently, and one SBA loan required, was that there be a release of tax lien. And so what they wanted is they wanted to look at prior years and make sure that all tax obligations were met for that practice over that period, which was kind of interesting to me because, one of the buyers had asked me, he said, it's so weird that because I'm a new company. So if I'm a new company and everything is new and I'm not assuming their EIN or I'm not assuming their business, I'm just taking over their business in bringing it into my business, my, new business. Why is that important? And it's because that there could possibly be liability to the new owner, with state taxes and things like that, that come down the road. The previous owner is no longer in business. Let's just say they're gone, they move out of state, they do something else. The state may come after the current owner for those liabilities. There should be something that tells the buyer that they're good standing with tax liabilities. I think that the buying doc needs to really make sure that their number one focus is on patient care, how they care for the patients. Is it similar to what the seller is doing? that needs to be like the number one priority is patient care. And at the end of the day, that's what you're buying a practice for, is to provide dental services to patients that need it. And so I think for me, that's probably the biggest.
Try not to change anything for the
Yeah,
first
don't
year.
change anything.
Okay.
It's hard to not change anything, especially when the seller has a 401k and they have health insurance and they have all of these things and these benefits for their employees. And you're like, how am I going to be able to afford that? They don't have practice debt the way I'm going to have practice debt. But the thing is it will work out at the end. In the long run, you might have to take a hit. You probably will take a hit the first few months that you're in practice ownership. But in the long run, as you start to get into the groove of how you're operating and what you're doing and how much the staff, I think Laura did mention how much the staff helped her transition, you're going to be leaning on that staff. So you want to make sure that they're happy and that they are open to having a relationship with you being a new doctor and working good, very well with you.
Okay, so let's just quickly touch on just a couple of common pitfalls to avoid, and then we'll kind of wrap the episode here.
That a buyer might encounter, I would say, if someone goes into this acquisition process without doing thorough due diligence, they really are just going into it blind, and even if you work for the seller, that doesn't mean that you are aware of all the information that you could be aware of. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily trying to hide something from you, but it's always best to just have all the information available to you.
And hiring someone to help you with that process, because you're not always going to know what it is that you're looking for when you're going through your due diligence. And, even if you work with us, if you trust our valuation and how we're valuing the dental practice and you say, I trust the Hindley Burgmaier group that they're giving me a really good price for this dental practice, you still should do due diligence no matter what, to make sure that you're looking at everything that you need to know about the practice.
Yeah, even when we represent the seller, we still highly suggest that a buyer, even if the buyer knows us and we've had a relationship with the buyer, we still encourage them to get their own due diligence elsewhere.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Join us next week as we have a very special guest joining us on the call. You won't want to miss it. It's going to be full of lots of educational gems and wisdom from an actual dentist who is going to be sharing his insights. I won't go any further or spoil it, but it's definitely going to be a great episode. Don't forget to like this video on your way out and subscribe to our channel for more great tips on running a successful dental practice every step of the way. We'll see you next time.